This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. I am Dr. Duke, and I am joined today by Vicki McKenna. Vicki, hello.
Hello.
Is it my imagination, or is the fascism coming quick? We have a really disturbing story here from Wisconsin of a young Christian man, Marcus Schrader, who's part of an organization called Warriors for Christ. He actually was arrested by Wisconsin police in the little town of Waterford simply for reading the gospel. Watertown, Wisconsin, not Waterford, Watertown. He was arrested simply for reading the gospels through a megaphone in the vicinity of an LGBTQ drag queen performance.
Yeah, he makes a point to say this as well. He wasn't reading anything incendiary from the Bible. He was just, and he had a microphone and he had a speaker. He was reading Galatians chapter 5. That's what he was reading. So he was talking about love. He wasn't talking about condemnation or anything like that. He was just talking about love. He was speaking for about 20 seconds before Watertown police took the microphone out of his hand. He objected. There's video of this of this arrest all over the place. It's viral, as they say. He objected to the microphone being taken out of his hand. Nobody told him why he was being arrested or why he couldn't stand on a sidewalk and read the Bible. By the way, what was going on at the time was a pride event inside a park called Riverside Park in Watertown. It wasn't really a pride event as much it was a drag queen kink for kids in the park event. So that's why he was there in the first place, as were many, many other Christians and other groups that were protesting, including a group in Wisconsin called Parents on Patrol, another group called Gays Against Groomers, several other Christian organizations were there as well. They were, the drag queens were performing for kids, taking dollar bills, and then fake Nazis show up and get a lot of attention. But the only person who got arrested was Marcus Schrader for reading the Bible. Again, police didn't tell him why he was being arrested. They ultimately claimed he had been using amplification without a permit. Nobody told him he needed amplification. Nobody asked him for a permit. And ultimately, upon research that I did, there is no ordinance that says you can't stand on a sidewalk with a microphone and a speaker. That only relates to vehicles in the city of Watertown. So there really wasn't any reason to arrest him. Furthermore, he was charged with resisting arrest. I again encourage people to go watch the video of his arrest. Charged with resisting because as they put his hands behind his back, his muscles tensed up. And I'm not kidding. The officer told him, "You were tensing your muscles." That's resisting arrest.
We got a video. Let's watch video of him being arrested right now.
You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another.
Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?
What is the problem?
I'm on vacation. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? What are you doing? I just think that my hand. You didn't give him any warning. You just grabbed the mic.
No, this is the same one that we had in here.
Yeah, that was in there. It was not out here. What is wrong with you? What are you doing? You didn't give us any warning.
Let it go. You guys have been warned. They say we can speak out here on the sidewalk freely.
You can speak, but there's no amplified device.
Nobody told us that.
What are you doing? Nobody told me that.
Well, how come there's no amplification?
Resist.
Hey, you guys are acting like thugs, man. You're acting like straight up thugs.
Hey, you're taking away my property.
He has every right to be out here engaging in speech.
Tyrants.
He has every right to be out here engaging in speech.
Absolute thuggery. That kid's got guts for saying it. And let me just ask you this.
That was not resisting arrest. I've talked to multiple police officers. That is simply not resisting arrest.
No, it's not. And it is outrageous. And this idea of illegal amplification, does that apply to every car radio booming out rap music when you pull up to next to them at a light?
It was actually the ordinance. The ordinance is actually probably designed for that.
Exactly.
If you read the Watertown ordinance, it explicitly says amplification without a permit in a vehicle. In a vehicle. It couldn't be clearer. So there wasn't an ordinance that there wasn't an ordinance that they could have cited him under. Now, arrest? Who gets arrested for an ordinance violation? You get a citation for an ordinance violation. They were not citing him. They arrested him. He went to the police station, got booked, got a mugshot for reading Galatians 5 on a sidewalk. Well away, by the way, from the events of the kink for kids in the park. He was on the other side of the fence. He wasn't even disturbing the event. Never mind that you are allowed actually to disturb someone's event, believe it or not. And that was proved when a group that claimed to be Nazis, they certainly looked like a false flag operation, but they claimed to be Nazis, marched through the park, got all of the attention, all the media attention, and what ultimately happened then was that everybody who was protesting the gay pride kink for kids event were, of course, associated with Nazis. And in fact, if you look up this story, it's all about the Nazis, and the protesters are essentially being lumped in with the Nazis protesting those poor drag queens. All they were doing was, twerking and bumping their crotch in the general vicinity of children. I mean, if you object to that, obviously you're a Nazi. And that's the frustrating thing about this is that so the Nazis come in, they wreak havoc, they get their press attention. By the way, they brought their own camera crew. They were happily willing to provide their video footage to the media. Nobody gets arrested. And not that wasn't protected speech either, as appalling as it is. Nobody gets arrested for, the salacious behavior with minor children in the park. The only person who gets arrested is a young man who reads the Bible. And he spoke at the Watertown council meeting a bit later. I believe it was 2 or 3 nights later, and did a wonderful job of explaining what happens if you cancel people like him who believe that we are all made in the image of Christ, who believe that we are all worthy of basic civil rights, basic human rights, because we are made in the image of God. If you reject that, what you're doing is you're making an argument for more Nazis, for more groups that hate, for more groups that are bigoted, for more groups that want to separate us. And he made a specific point as well to say, I wasn't there quoting the Bible out of hate. I was talking about love, and I wanted to talk to people. And he was prevented from doing that by the police, who really should be ashamed of themselves.
Vicki, after the break, there's 2 questions I'm going to ask you. One is, let's talk more about how we know this is a false flag. These weren't real Nazis, okay. Number one. By the way, I love their Walmart Nazi flags. They look like they were made completely... It was just ridiculous. We'll talk about that. And the second thing, okay. That video you mentioned of him speaking, we got that as well. So we'll look at that right away.
Wonderful.
Back again with Vicki McKenna, and we're talking about Watertown, Wisconsin, little sleepy town, pretty little town, where rogue cops, I can't think of a better name I do. How about fascist cops, decided that they were going to arrest a young man on a public sidewalk simply for reading Galatians in the Bible, the New Testament, in the vicinity of a drag queen show. They take his mic out of his hand. They handcuff him. They drag him to jail. They don't give him a ticket. They mugshot the kid. This is outrageous. Now we have
fingerprints, the whole shebang.
Oh, absolutely. How's that for sending
He's a wonderful young kid. He's 19 years old. And let me just read for those of you who are unfamiliar, just in case you think, well, maybe there was something incendiary in what he was reading. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. That's what he was reading. That's the message he was trying to send. What a beautiful message that was, and how appropriate. It was not confrontational in any way. And that was, again, the only thing that was punished. The Nazis were not punished. The drag queens twerking for children, taking dollar bills, not punished. Just the young man quoting the Bible on the street.
Before
in Watertown, Wisconsin, you'll be happy to know, or maybe distressed to know, is considered a relatively Christian conservative community. Politically conservative as well, but just sort of a respectable, nice Christian community, nice people, a nice area, and it's just sort of, it's confounding to think that somehow this went off in Watertown, Wisconsin, and the two winners were the twerking drag queens and the Nazis.
Well, let's hear it from the mouth of the young man himself.
When I showed up Saturday, all I did was read from Scripture on the sidewalk. I read from the Bible, Galatians. And by the way, I wasn't reading Romans 1. I wasn't reading any passage that spoke against homosexuality or anything like that. I was reading a passage from the Bible about love. And I was arrested. No reason, not given any warning, not told anything about my amplification needing to be turning down. I was arrested and taken into custody simply for reading the Bible on the sidewalk. You see, as we become more and more tolerant of sexual immorality in our culture, we become more and more intolerant towards Christian morality. And the more we become intolerant towards Christian morality, the more we're going to see lawlessness in our streets. The more we become intolerant of Christian morality, the more we're going to see Nazis. The more we're going to see people who don't hold to a Christian worldview, who think that everybody is a result of animals, and therefore if we are animals, then why can't we just act like animals? We were called a hate group. We were told that we don't want to understand the other side, and I just want to set the record straight. I am more than happy to have that conversation with the other side. I did speech and debate throughout high school, and one of the things that we were taught in debate is that you can't make an argument for your side until you're able to make the argument for the other side. I've sat down and had hours of discussions with LGBTQ activists. I completely understand the other side. I want to understand the other side. But drag queens twerking on kids in lingerie is unacceptable, and that's something that we have to notice as a culture. We can have our disagreements, but there comes a time when we have to understand that we are all going to stand before God one day, and we're going to have to give an account for what we have done with the children in our society, the innocent minds, and the children who deserve to be protected.
What a remarkable young man. I'm sure he didn't become that way because of the college he's going to. I'll tell you this too, Vicki.
No.
There's only one answer, it seems to me, just one. Why you would arrest that kid but not even question the Nazis is that you know that if you were to arrest them, you'd find out that they weren't really Nazis at all. They were leftist cosplayers, right?
Yes, they were Nazi cosplayers. Yes, I think that's exactly true. Everything from the timing to the, perfectly matched outfits, same flat front pants, same sunglasses, same masks, same hoodies. I mean, they look like the phony Fed Patriot Front group from January 6th. The professionally done flags. And they're a Nazi group you can't look up. And if you do look up this group, they're called supposedly Blood Tribe. And if you look this group up, you will find one reference, and that will be the Southern Poverty Law Center, a notorious organization that attempts to label conservative groups as hate groups and claims to have a list of hate groups in the United States. You cannot find a website for this organization. They do not have social media presence. The only reference is Southern Poverty Law Center. And then the Anti-Defamation League did a post on them, but they referenced Southern Poverty Law Center. So there's one source of information about this terrifying, nefarious neo-Nazi group that just happened to appear perfectly timed with the beginning of the drag queen dancing, just perfectly timed with perfectly matched outfits. And they just happened to have someone there filming everything who just happened to be willing to provide that video footage to the media, who just happened to be standing by ready to do the story. And it just happened to discredit all of the Christians, all of the mom groups, the Gays Against Groomers group. It just happened to discredit all of the protesters because every single headline was the same after the Nazis showed up. It was too well timed. It was too well coordinated. It was too well choreographed. It was too perfect and impossible to research. It was too good to check, as they say.
I'm going to ask my producer when he edits this to put up the little trademark symbol when I say what I'm about to say, because I'm going to coin these people the Walmart Wehrmacht, right? That's who this is. A bunch of cosplaying high school morons. The Walmart Wehrmacht is what we're going to call them. Before we move on, I know that you have already talked to the young man on your radio program. You and I are going to talk about this later today on your program. But I know that you got in touch with Will Law Firm. Explain really quickly to the audience who the Will Law Firm is and what you've tried to set up here to allow this young man, Marcus Schrader, to actually sue the pants off of that stupid little community.
Yeah. And it's up to him ultimately, but he is, I got him in contact with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. It's a public interest legal firm that stands on behalf of the Bill of Rights. If your constitutional rights are violated in any way, whether it is your constitutional right against unreasonable search and seizure, free speech, Second Amendment, they exist in a pro bono capacity to represent citizens on behalf of the United States and Wisconsin Constitution. And so I was speaking to one of their First Amendment lawyers, and they have an equality project. They have a First Amendment project. They call it the Free Speech Project. And he said, I need to know more, but this looks like a classic violation of the First Amendment. So, but of course, it's entirely in the hands of the young man. He's 19, so he's an adult to decide whether he wants to pursue this. But people think he has a case.
Now, do you talk to him? Do you think he's mindful of that? I mean, he's a very responsible young man, and I'd like to think for everybody else, not for himself. He really does need to push this as hard as he can. Where is he mentally with regards to that?
I don't know. I mean, he's in terms of where is he mentally? He's in just obviously very self-possessed, strong, moral, decent, and nice young man. So again, I don't know where he is in a decision-making process in any way. But certainly, I think if we could expect to see people like him in his generation, then maybe there's hope at the end of the tunnel. Because wow, did I just say hope at the end of the tunnel? I meant light at the end of the tunnel. He gives me some peace that not everybody in Gen Z is out to sea somewhere.
Well, there is some surveys out that seem to suggest that Gen Z is considerably more conservative than the one nasty little generation.
At least the males in Gen Z, the boys and the men in Gen Z.
Well, but when you think about Gen Z males, they don't seem to have the testosterone and the courage that this young man has. And so if you could do that, if we can bring along some of those men in Gen Z acting like men, not just thinking like men, that could make a big difference. So before you go, then a couple. Go ahead.
I wanted to say one thing. One of the things that is not related to this story per se, but I think has got wider application. What I've been noticing is that the most successful protests or counter protests have been protests of prayer. And I don't want to lose an opportunity to remind people of this in case you think it's all too scary and you don't want to be part of rabble rousing. Everybody needs to confront the evil and the filth that is completely consuming our young people, that is stealing their souls. And one of the things that what did Marcus do? He had a handful of friends who were there. They were praying. They were reading from the Bible and they were praying. If you think back to Los Angeles and the Dodgers protest, it was 5,000 Catholics praying the rosary. If you get together, and all of the Christian protesters, by the way, in Watertown over the weekend, what were they doing? They were not shouting, they were not chanting, they were praying. And what you cannot confront and what never makes a good media story is when people harass peaceful Christians praying. So think about that. If you think you can do nothing else, I bet you and your church group can show up and pray in public.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, think about over the last couple of years, certainly since the Dobbs case from the Supreme Court, how many old elderly people have been punched in the face when they are simply praying outside of abortion clinics? Think about what's going on in Canada for the last 10 years. How many pastors, Mark Stein, how many people who have been standing up for Christianity and the ability of Christians to read the Bible in public places in Canada have been dragged before tribunals? I think you're exactly right. This is the demonic nature of what we're dealing with, and prayer is the greatest adjutant to all of this. You get the last word.
Agreed. And please make it public. I'm not for praying by yourself, or I'm not against praying by yourself. But if you want to actually affect an incredible change, be peaceful and pray together and pray in the face of this evil. And, if the police come up and arrest you, don't throw a punch, say a prayer for them.
I seem to remember somewhere Jesus saying in the gospel, that's exactly what they're going to do to you, right? If you are praying correctly, they will come after you, the authorities.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have to be willing to take it.
And that young man,
you absolutely have to be willing to take it.
And that young man is heroically Christian. And that's going to wrap up the show. If you have any questions, comments, or want to support the show, simply visit drdukeshow.com. For all of us at the Dr. Duke Show and for Vicki McKenna, I think I can speak for her. Thanks. We'll see you next time.